Assassin's Creed Rogue is probably the most bizarre game of all the main releases in the Assassin's Creed series. Everything about it, from its development to the kind of story it was very different from anything we had seen in Assassin's Creed, even now. It's by far the least selling and least well-known game in the series, but it also has sort of become a cult classic in a sense, as there's a small but strong group within the community that would defend this game no matter what. I've seen plenty of these people since I've started my channel. I hear people say it's underrated, some say so many people call it underrated that it's actually overrated. The discussions around this game can just get weird. Personally, I like Rogue, I don't think it's a bad game, but I can't necessarily say it's one of my favorites or top games in the series. In fact, if I were to rank the games, which I will eventually, it'd probably be pretty low in the rankings, and it's not because I think it's bad, or that I don't like the concept, but this game was just shortchanged by Ubisoft. The circumstances with how Rogue came to be are very weird, and it was never given the resources nor the time to actually be successful. It's almost like Ubisoft made this game with the expectation that it wouldn't do very well, like it was set up to fail. I get that really the sole purpose of the game was to give an alternative option to those who still only had Xbox 360s and PS3s who couldn't play Unity, but having a studio that, mind you, had never made its own full Assassin's Creed game, develop a game with limited resources and only 8 months of development time? I don't see how anybody at Ubisoft thought that was a recipe for success. All things considered, what Ubisoft Sofia was able to do with Assassin's Creed Rogue in only 8 months is extremely impressive. I'm sure that wasn't a super stressful situation to be in, but this is why I say Ubisoft did Assassin's Creed Rogue dirty. The game was put in a position to fail by higher-ups, and it never really stood a chance. Yet, despite all that, it still came out to be a pretty decent game. Funnily enough, the development of Mirage was rather similar, having a smaller studio in Ubisoft Bordeaux make its first Assassin's Creed game with limited resources and time. Only with Mirage, Bordeaux had a little over 2 years to develop the game, which still isn't a lot, but seems like a luxury in comparison to the measly 8 months Ubisoft Sofia had to develop Rogue. And I don't know if anyone remembers this, but Rogue had little to no marketing when it was coming out. All the marketing budget and focus seemed to have gone to Unity. Again, it's like they didn't want people to buy this game. Rogue was really just more of an afterthought, because they didn't want to make Unity available for both generations of consoles, because then they would have to heavily downgrade the game when it came to the graphics and such, but they didn't want to miss out on the money they could make off of those who still didn't have the newer consoles, which is why near last minute this was thrown into development. It's a real shame too, because I've stated so many times in the past that I feel a game like Rogue had so much potential that completely went to waste because they had to have this game ready to launch at the same time as Unity that had already been in development for 4 years. Imagine if Rogue was actually given the proper time and resources to be more of its own game, rather than for the most part a Black Flag clone. The story is interesting, Shay is a really unique protagonist, even if there are still some flaws and plot holes with the story. I think this game deserves the chance to be in the spotlight after years of development, and not just the game being rushed to be put together in Unity's shadow. Which is why I honestly believe Assassin's Creed Rogue is deserving of a remake. I mean, granted, the odds of that ever happening are next to impossible, because it was the series' lowest selling game by far, but I think this concept and this story deserves to be transplanted in a new game with its own gameplay and better graphics. Again, a lot of people really liked Black Flag's gameplay and the story of Rogue, which is why the game was still somewhat well received, but can you imagine if Rogue actually got the time and resources of other games in the series with a remake or something? That's something I would really like to see, but again, that's pretty much impossible. I mean, never say never and all that, and Shay could work his magic and make his own luck, I suppose. But yeah, I don't see it happening in a million years, unfortunately. I do feel this would also present the opportunity to clarify some things in the story and patch up some plot holes, especially with those precursor sites and Shay's defection to the Templars. Maybe they could even throw in a fun epilogue to see what happened to Shay after Rogue, who knows? Because even the story was on a deadline for Rogue. According to Stephen Piovesan, who voiced Shay, they were still writing the story as they were recording for it. Again, I'm just impressed Ubisoft Sofia got this game out in time and was still actually able to make some new additions from Black Flag, even if there aren't too many of them. Regardless, I still like Rogue, but man, it deserved better. I think it deserved the same chance a lot of the other games got, and not just a game that was meant to appease players of the previous generation of consoles and make more money off of those who didn't have the new consoles to play Unity. But what's done is done, I suppose. Maybe by some miracle we get a remake someday, but yeah, I wouldn't get my hopes up. But let me know how you guys feel about AC Rogue, and whether or not it was essentially set up to fail by Ubisoft. And would you like to see the game be remade someday so it can live up to its full potential? I mean, we do know for sure they're making a Black Flag remake, so they could potentially use that as a foundation for a Rogue remake as well. But as always, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like and consider subscribing to the channel if you're new. And other than that, thanks for watching, and go make your own luck out there, everybody.